Welcome to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zorkel Profiles. I'm here with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. Tracy, I'm so excited about our guest today, Scott Greenberg. So, for 10 years, Scott was a multi unit franchisee with edible arrangements. In addition to building a top ranked flagship location in Los Angeles, Scott acquired a second struggling location and made it profitable within the first year. His operation won the Edible Arrangements Best Customer Service and Manager of the Year awards out of more than 1,000 locations worldwide. Scott sold his enterprise in 2015, and today he focuses full time on speaking, coaching, and writing for the franchise industry. Scott is a VIP contributing writer for entrepreneurial.com, Global Franchise Magazine, and Nation's Restaurant News. And he's also the author of the book, The Wealthy Franchisee: Game-Changing Steps to Becoming a Thriving Franchise Superstar, as well as his new title, Stop the Shift Show: Turn Your Struggling Hourly Workers into a Top Performing Team. And we're going to really dig into both of those topics. Scott, welcome. I just had to have you on the show after I saw you speak at the Franchise Business Review Summit a couple of weeks ago in Denver. So thanks for joining us.
I'm so glad and I'm so honored. And you don't have a lot of men on this show, right? Am I
No.
correct? All right. So I'm thrilled to come on and mansplain and to to do whatever you allow me to do. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
We love your mansplaining. We love it. So
Yeah,
thank you.
my wife doesn't, but as long as someone does. So
Yeah. It's always different in your own household. You're an expert outside of your household. You're just a husband and father when you're at home, right? It's just a complete.
yeah. It's my 18-year-old daughter who believes that she's the expert and she's always there to correct me and tell me how wrong I am. So I know my place.
18-year-olds know everything.
I know. I'm jealous of all that my daughter knows.
It's amazing how their brains are. I mean, trust me, at 25, all of a sudden she's going to wake up and she's going to go, Dad's pretty smart. I mean, I think he kind of has it figured out, but it usually takes a few years. I got older kids than you, so I
Yeah.
can,
Well, I,
yeah,
I think the expression is by the time, your kids realize you were usually right, they have kids telling them they're usually wrong. So,
yeah, yeah. It's so funny. I remember my daughter when she had her first baby, and there she is nursing the baby, and I'm there taking care of her for the first 6 or 7 weeks, and she's just bawling. Mom, I was such a terrible kid. I don't know how you took care of me, how you continue to love me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't remember you being a bad kid. But all of a sudden, when she had her own child, she appreciated what motherhood was like. So I want to talk about your books. I want to talk about your experience. But before I start drilling you and Tracy starts drilling you with questions, is there a message? Is there something you want to tell the world of franchising in particular, that's on your heart, on your mind, that you now have a platform to talk about?
yeah, I think about this a lot. There's a lot of topics that I write about or that I speak on, but if I had to put them all together, what really interests me, what I'm passionate about, is what I call the human side of business. How we think, how we lead, and how we treat people and serve guests, serve clients, that sort of thing. I think we get so caught up in the operations and the marketing and everything that's got to get done that we forget how much we ourselves are either an asset or a liability to the business. I started off long before getting into franchising. I was a straight out motivational speaker. And I got into franchising to obviously make more money, but to try out the things that I've been saying on stage. And, some of it did not translate, but a lot of it did. And when I look at top performers in a variety of places, and most certainly in business and franchising, they're really good at those human elements. And so when I wrote The Wealthy Franchisee, sort of intended to be a personal growth book disguised as a business book. Because when you master those things, it leads to better business decisions. And same thing with the second book. That's all about managing hourly workers. And there's so many human elements, things that make hourly workers different than those on salary, which means we need a higher level of management. And great managers, they don't just know the systems, they understand how to have influence and how to build culture and how to engage and inspire. All this falls under that category of the human side of business. And so I think when we can be better people, we can be more effective business leaders.
Boom,
So
mic drop.
I want to clarify something for our audience. When you talk about hourly employees, are you talking about a certain generation like Gen Z? Is it mixed? Is it a mixed bag? Is it a very specific demographic? What is the hourly employees? Just so that we know, like we have that starting point.
It's a great question because, you could argue that, attorneys who charge by the hour, could be hourly employees. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about generally people who come with a little less experience, perhaps a little less education. They're getting paid what's probably a lower wage than someone who is on salary. So it's a group that makes up the majority of people. First of all, the majority of people in the workforce, and certainly the majority of people in franchising. So certainly those working in, hospitality, in restaurants, in retail. Increasingly, we suddenly have higher skilled people, lab techs and nurses, that sort of thing, who might be earning hourly wages. And so much of what I talk about still applies to that group, but it's really for that kind of like usually the lower wage, the lower skilled worker, which makes up, I think, 58% of the workforce. That's what I like to focus on because their needs, their experience of work, completely different than those on salary.
Interesting.
Wow. So my guess is many of those would be younger, first-time employees out of college or out of high school. Um, Many of them would fall under that arena. So
Well, for
what?
sure, yeah, for sure, it includes younger people, and that's important because if they're under age 25, their brains aren't done developing. They're like, so what we have a lot to say about Generation Z right now, but a lot of people from Generation Z in the workforce are still growing. They're not yet the people that they are going to be. And, I mean, the one thing that makes Generation Z different than all other generations is that at the moment, they're younger. I mean, they'll always be younger than previous generations, but they're the youngest. Their brains are still developing. But the complaints that we have about them aren't too different than the complaints we had about millennials. What my parents said about us. Every generation, thinks the younger generations are lazier, don't have a work ethic. We can say that this generation, that they're addicted to their phones, that they're snowflakes. And by the way, I'm not saying there isn't certain truth to that because I'm raising two of them. But what is also true historically is that everybody has thought less of the generations that come after them. And so part of what we have to do is understand the unique characteristics of every generation, just like we need to understand the unique characteristics of the consumer base who we're trying to sell to. But we also have to catch ourselves. Where are we repeating the same assumptions, the same
Mhm.
criticisms as every generation before us? Every generation has said kids these days and complained about them. So there's a certain self-management that's there that we have to overcome. It's not about are they better or worse. It's what makes them tick and how can we tap into that to make them tick better. That's a more constructive way of looking at them.
It really is, and I like the word tick. When we look at what makes them tick, is that what drives them, what motivates them, things that are important to them? And does that change from generation to generation? And therefore, our management styles or the way we motivate or the way we build teams also needs to change?
Absolutely. So there are some universal values. They're universal and they're timeless. Everybody wants to feel respect. Everybody wants to connect to those around them. Everybody wants to be acknowledged. But every generation has different things. And when we look at younger generations, there's much more of a need for emotional safety.
Mhm.
I'm Gen X. I expect to be abused by my boss, right? I never expected life balance. That was never a priority. I just thought you go to work, you suffer through it, and it shouldn't be that way. I don't want my kids to think of it that way. But younger people are like, you know what? I'm not going to put up with that. I'm not going to tolerate that. And so there's a higher value placed on life balance, on emotional safety, as well as physical safety. The data shows they're also a lot more entrepreneurial. So when brands bring me in to speak on this topic, I say, if you have younger people and they're coming in more entrepreneurial, tap into that because it'll motivate them. Treat the job like a paid internship. Have conversations about their long-term goals so they feel like they're actually getting trained to achieve those goals here. So there are universal, timeless things that we all want, but every generation has some unique things, just like every consumer base has, unique desires. So our job is to figure out what those things are and manage around that. And I don't think that that is enabling anybody or encouraging bad behaviors. It's just understanding them so we know how to manage them. It's no different than how we should be treating the consumers.
Wow. This is such a timely conversation because I'm actually working with a group, and it's a private equity group that took over in this particular industry. And the biggest problem that all of the presidents of each of the individual companies are talking about are how to motivate the Gen Zs, because they're used to working with these long-term people in these family businesses. It's such a timely topic. So yeah, an introduction might be in order.
I think
I would love
Right.
I would love that. But yeah, I mean, but it starts with like if I have to understand that generation, I have to first understand my own psychological relationship to that generation. What are my assumptions? What are my
Right.
judgments? What are my triggers? Like I need to put those things in check so I'm in a better place to manage them. I'm creating a new online course called the Hourly Employee Management System. It's all about, getting people certified and trained how to manage hourly workers. The first module is about self-management, like understanding your own biases and your own habits and putting all that stuff in check so that you can have more influence on new generations. And so I think that that is important. But yeah, I'll take the referral.
Yeah, for
there you
sure.
go.
And the other thing is what you just said about your new online course. It sounds like it has a lot of emotional intelligence woven into it. Is that the case?
For sure. But again, what's nice about what I feel is beneficial from my journey is I came up as a motivational speaker and then I got into business and spent my own money with real employees, with real customers, the profit and loss statement. Emotional intelligence ain't enough. You need to understand marketing. You need to understand, discipline. You need to understand hard work. Um, there's a lot that's there. So it's a balance of emotional intelligence and business intelligence. And so I think that it's important that we combine that and not get too caught up and say, hey, it's just about making people feel good. It's just about faith. No, it's also about understanding the numbers and reports and data. So I'm really all about that balance. But the simple answer is absolutely. There's a strong element of emotional intelligence there, not just because it makes us feel good, but because it allows us to be more efficient. It allows us to make a better investment of our time, and it allows us to have more influence over those people who we're trying to lead.
So it's this wonderful balance of hard skills, sales, marketing, operations, finance, technical skills, needing to possess those in the right amounts, depending on what business you're in, obviously, combined with that emotional and social intelligence where I can control my thoughts and control my time and my emotions and be empathetic and all of those things. But one doesn't, in your mind, outweigh the other. We need both to be successful as employees as well as franchisees. Would you agree with that? Would you expound on that?
Completely. I sort of look at, especially in the franchise industry, I look at a great franchise business as the franchisor provides you with the race car, right? The tool, the proven system. Franchisee fills up the gas tank, and there's different qualities of gas. We need both if we're going to win the race. And so I think that the human element determines how will we execute operations. So that's really important. Certainly as Oracle, Rebecca, I know that's exactly kind of what you're about. It's like it's getting the franchisees who kind of have that right mindset so that they can take advantage of the great system. The wrong system, the wrong tool, the right system, the right tool in the hands of the wrong people isn't going to get anywhere. So I'm purposely plugging what you do, not just because it's your show, but because I think it's a good example of that. And so that's kind of what I'm about, is helping people understand how do you take that great franchise system and then infuse it with the right human elements so that your race car can win the race.
Yeah.
So I'd like to add, excuse me, I'd like to add an element to that because I was looking at your LinkedIn profile and one of the articles that you wrote about values and about how to really get your hourly employees to embrace the values? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. Well, again, sort of like with, with a, franchisee, part of what you're looking for franchisees so they can kind of get behind the mission of the organization and the values. It's
Mhm.
similar. So it starts off with recruiting, that you want to be very clear in your help wanted posts and your messaging about who you are and what you care about. Hopefully that it'll attract people who also want the same thing. And then you're asking, interview questions that kind of test for that. Like, are they really on board with it? Then once we've hired and you think that they're aligned or they're pretty similar, then we need to be very direct about helping them understand what the values are.
Mhm.
Before you train them in their work, we need to train them in teamwork and we need to train them in culture. And so that means understanding here are our 5 or 6 primary values, but we don't just want you to be able to name them. We want you to know what they look like. So here are the
Mhm.
behaviors that we are all about. Here's the behaviors we don't tolerate. They're not rules, but they're agreements because that's what defines us. So you're training them in that. And by the way, the best people to train them are other team members as
Mhm.
opposed to management, because the team members, they don't own the business, but they own the culture. So if I hear about it from a coworker, it's like, okay, I guess this stuff is real, and we hold each other accountable to it. So we define what they are, we train them in it, and then we're constantly reinforcing it so that when someone is like doing something that really honors a value, we are all over that with praise and acknowledgement. And the opposite is true. When they do something that goes against your values, we're naming it. We're not just, saying, hey, bad job, or they need to understand how what they did directly violates the culture. And so these values are a great way for us to do it. But we need to, here's the thing about hourly workers and how they're different on salary. Because hourly workers tend to be younger, have less experience, less education, they don't do as well with abstraction.
Mhm.
You can say we stand for integrity. Well, make sure they actually understand what integrity is, because often they don't, right? So we need to take it off the mountaintop and bring it down to the floor and talk more about behaviors. And they need to understand, hey, the other day when you were gossiping about one of your coworkers, it made our culture weaker. It wasn't consistent with what we always say about, teamwork or, compassion or whatever the value is. So you're talking in terms of how it wasn't just the isolated behavior, but how that behavior defies what the culture is.
Mhm.
So we use values as a place that we're constantly referring back to. So they really understand that this whole thing is about that your values are the backbone of the team.
Of the team, of the culture. I liked that you blended those, that values are a large part of what culture is, but it's also, as you described, the best practices, the environments, and you even mentioned the reward systems of acknowledging and rewarding someone, but to clearly define those best practices and those behaviors that equal that value and that culture. Anything that you can't put in a wheelbarrow, like a value, you can't really put that in a wheelbarrow, is hard to comprehend. So defining it more clearly and providing that feedback, I think, is absolutely brilliant.
And we
Can
don't
I
think about culture when we think of a quick service restaurant or
know?
we think of lawn care, right? You think of it like in a corporate setting, right? People talk about that, but we don't really talk about it. We don't think about it. Everybody just wants to like market and sell and get the pizzas out of the oven and boxed and delivered. Yet culture, here's the thing, in an hourly environment, you're probably not paying people as well. So what are you going to do to get them to stay, to get them to perform? And
Mhm.
culture is one way that you can enhance that, right? If you're willing to understand that culture, not only does it matter in this environment, it actually matters more because anybody can pay another dollar per hour, but if they feel connected, right, and they feel like it lights up their life, they're less likely to leave. So we have to pay as much attention to the employee experience via culture as we do the customer experience. And customers will pay more for a better experience. Employees will accept less for a better experience when they feel part of a culture. Not that we should pay them less, but when we can't, but there's not as much of burden to have to pay the most and break your labor goals when you can compensate them in ways that might actually matter more to them.
I want to
Interesting.
highlight that because compensation is not just dollars and cents, right? it is a lot of other things, that sense of belonging that you talked about, the sense of being appreciated and feeling significant and that I'm contributing to something. There are a lot of different ways to compensate someone, along with the financial, of course. I love this conversation, and I really want to talk about the franchisee. Can I shift gears for a second? Because when we talk about the franchisee, one of the things I read about in your review of your book, The Wealthy Franchisee, uh, was Rush Jaunt, who is the founder of Conserve Irrigation, and they had you at a conference speaking on this very topic. And he said something about this idea of a top performer algorithm, meaning a franchisee top performer. And when we talked offline, you mentioned that a lot of that is around mindset. Can you give us a few clues to what that mindset needs to be for a franchisee to be successful?
Sure. And I want to acknowledge that there's probably no one who knows this better than you do. Your whole operation is about like identifying that awesome franchisee and what the characteristics are and having technology to test for that, which is why I just adore both of you and adore the work that you do. In my experience, like when I wrote that book, I really I not only reflected on what where I succeeded and where I failed, my observations about others in the system, but because I also have this job of traveling around and going to different franchise conventions to speak, and I get to meet all their franchisees, those who are struggling, their top performers, and those who are in between. So I've been very deliberate about talking to the top performers, trying to find that common denominator. What is they all have in common? It's not that they have the best locations, the most
Mhm.
experience, the most education. That's just not what it is. And if it was, I would have written about that in my book. I mean,
Mhm.
I didn't care what the reasons were specifically. I had a feeling it was probably around this human side based off of my previous experience, but I really was open-minded to whatever the answers were so that I could um, be as helpful as possible. And I've sort of narrowed it down to three things. And really, the wealthy franchisee, if I were to take everything in that book and I had to just boil it down to just three things, what these top performers have in common is, first of all, they keep a clear head. They get rid of all that mental junk that gets in their way. So they're not giving into fear. They're not getting into jealousy. They're not giving into greed, right? They really look at things objectively, right? And I noticed I didn't say they're really positive and have lots of faith. No, their head is clear, right? It's not positive and negative. It's about clarity. So making data-based decisions, sprinkled in with a little bit of courage and trust.
Yeah.
So they keep a clear head. They stick to the proven system. Okay, which is also mindset. They're not there trying to overthink it, thinking they know better, saying, well, my market's different. I hear that all the time. You don't know what it's like in our, okay, yes, I know what it's like. It's like everywhere else. Um, so they keep a clear head, they stick to the proven system, and maybe most importantly, they use their business to improve the lives of everyone it touches. They wake up in the morning and say, we exist to help other people achieve their goals, to help other people feel better, whether it is the customer, employees, their franchisor, suppliers, their community. They understand that if their business helps other people live and work and experience life in a better way, it's going to come back to them. They're going to have more loyalty from everyone, better performance from everyone, and it's going to be much better. So it's about putting value out in 360 directions with the faith that it's going to come back to you. So keep a clear head, stick to the proven system, use your business to improve the lives of everyone it touches.
Is is that a mindset? Would you put all that into the category of having a different type of mindset? And what is that mindset?
Very much. Great question. It is, because I think a lot of people, the mindset is, well, just teach me the system and I'm just going to work really hard and then I'll refine it because I'm smarter and I have experience because I used to work for some corporation. So part of it is being able to let go of that and trust it, right? Hopefully you've vetted the franchise to trust the system and trust the people who are behind it. So the trust is there. Letting go of your ego, right? Not having that there. The ability to cultivate, relationships, to understand in a franchise, unlike a mom and pop shop, you're buying a piece of a brand and you're part of that community. And so there's some responsibility and accountability that is there. Just because it's good for your business doesn't mean it's good for all the other locations, in which case you can't do it, because as soon as locations start to differ, it weakens the whole brand and then weakens the exit value of your business. So yeah, it is about trust. It is about building relationships. It's about, you see an employee and you don't think of them as someone who exists just to improve your business and you want to manage their work. You see them as someone who you want to grow, who you want to develop, with the trust that when that happens, they're going to be more loyal and they're going to do better work. That when you see your customers, it's a mindset to think, I'm not just here to sell them a widget or to fix their widget. I'm here to elevate their emotions, to use what I do, whatever the transaction is, to elevate them. Because if I can make them feel better, they're going to remember us, talk about us, and come back for more. So it's always getting back to that human side. What is my impact on others? And what is my own mental impact on me and my ability to provide that value? That's very different than just, I want to work hard, tell me how to market, how can I cut costs?
It's
It,
Scott, I want to talk about what you're saying and psychologically and financially how those things go together. Because if we're thinking of others, whether it's our employees, our customers, the system, and making it better, when we are others oriented and we are contributing through some purpose that we see, a bigger purpose, all kinds of beautiful chemicals get released in the brain, including dopamine and endorphin and norepinephrine, all kinds of beautiful chemicals that makes us feel more bonded, more on the same team, more about how we can all do better together. It gives us a feeling of satisfaction and humility, as you talked about, but satisfaction that doesn't come from just making money. So there's a chemical reaction that happens, but there's this beautiful blessing that happens in that I'm focused on my employees and helping them have better lives and to learn and to grow and to develop. I'm doing the same for my customer, and I'm contributing back to my franchisor. It's a win-win-win in terms of our emotions and our feeling of being part of something bigger, but ultimately that always turns into dollars and cents. Always. It's just a kind of a universal law that happens. And I'm sorry I got on my preaching mode there, because I agree with you 100%. So let me ask you a question regarding all of that. You talked about what the franchisee or the employer, how they can get their employees to buy into a certain set of cultures or values. How can a franchisor do the same, where they get this trust, where they get this contribution, where they take care of their employees? What can a franchisor do to nurture this kind of mindset?
do you mean within just their corporate office, or do you mean within the entire brand?
I think both, because you're right, it has to start at the corporate office and then that bleeds all the way out. So can you address both for us?
Yes. My answer would be in the exact same way. That first of all, you're testing for it, right? So again, if you're using smart technology like yours, what you're looking for is there a cultural fit? Can people buy into the values? That's it. But even when someone just contacts you for the first time, right, in development, is part of what you're sharing is, hey, this is our culture, by the way. You're not just buying the system, the business, but you're buying a culture and you're applying to be part of that culture. So you're selling it, but you're also saying this might be a barrier to entry, because if you're not part of this culture, if you don't fit, this isn't going to work for us. So you're as much a culture as a business, and then you're constantly talking about it, constantly talking about your mission, and constantly talking about your values. And with too many franchise brands, the mission and values were created by marketing people, that it's marketing jargon and not a true mission. The mission doesn't exist for consumers on the outside. The mission exists for people on the inside of the community, so they know what they're after. And same thing with values. Like, what consumers out there are thinking, well, I choose that company because they have a really nice mission statement. Like, no one's making decisions. So why even bother making that a big marketing piece? The mission statement, even if it's awkward, even forget mission statements. If people generally know our sense of why, that's great. And when I was with Edible Arrangements, the mission was to wow you. And that mission, it's customer facing. It's literally saying you as the customer to wow you. I was never really sure what that meant for me though, as a franchisee. Like, I understand, okay, customer experience, but still there's something that was, missing there. And again, I love that company, the people who are running it, and I still do. Um, but I think that the actual language isn't as important as a general understanding. So I think that great franchise brands, they talk about their values, they talk about their mission, whatever it is, constantly, and they show what that looks like. I've worked with a lot of great brands. Anytime Fitness, which was sort of the flagship brand of self-esteem brands, they're so big on their culture and their values that the two founders literally wrote a book about it. And they talk about it all the time. And everybody understands that their mission is to raise the self-esteem of the world. And they talk
Yes.
about it a lot. And their franchisees are so into it, they tattoo the Anytime Fitness logo on their bodies. It's incredible how many of them have this tattoo because they're so into it. And so I think we have to constantly talk about it and reinforce it, and hold people accountable to it.
I'm thinking of getting a Zarko Profiles tattoo, like right here.
We get a Z on her.
Yeah, a Z. So I kind of have a two-part question. One is, you were talking about franchisees, or franchise owners, the successful ones, keeping a clear head. And the other part is, who is it within the organization who needs to read your book? Exactly.
Well, you ask an author that question, you know the answer you're going to get.
Everyone.
And what does that clear head look like? That was it. So who needs to read your book, and what does that clear head look like exactly?
Okay, so we're talking about the Wealthy Franchisee now, or Stop the Shift show?
Probably both.
Okay, good. And by the way, you notice that my question was also an opportunity for me to mention both titles of both books.
Right.
So,
Oh, got it. Good work.
yeah,
You're
I'm just
clearly a promoter.
right.
You've already figured out your profile. You're clearly
Anybody who's worthy of being on this show should be a hustler. So I'm not gonna deny it. So here's the thing is, of course, I'm going to say that everybody, and not just because I want to sell lots of books. It's like, you know what, franchisor, you can buy a book and then you can just hand it and share it. I'm not saying to buy a book for everyone. But in terms of the Wealthy Franchisee, I think franchisors, I would love for them to read and understand it so they know what to look for and they know what to reinforce. And
Okay.
I mean, it's interesting. The main thing that I do is franchise brands bring me in to give presentations and trainings for their franchisees. What the franchisors want for franchisees is different than what the franchisees want, right?
Mm.
Franchisees, they want to hear about marketing. They want to hear about how can they find employees, maybe improve retention, what can they do to build sales. But there's no franchisee who's like, hey, can you help me improve my mindset? Can you help me, get out of my own way and stop acting with fear? Franchisees aren't asking that, right? But franchisors see it's an issue. So there's a reason why I called the book The Wealthy Franchisee and not the happy franchisee or the life balanced franchisee, right? It's wealthy because it's appealing to the thing they want, but I keep that promise because what gets you to wealth, what makes you successful, it's all of these human factors. So franchisors, I think, should read the book so that they sort of understand what all these elements are, so they can name it, so they can do a better job, especially with an operations and field support, to encourage and reinforce these things and call franchisees out when they're getting in their own way. I think then everyone within the franchise organization, so the same thing. But then, I wrote the book with franchisees in mind, saying, you want to be successful, here's what the best people are doing. And I profile these great franchisees throughout. And so in that regard, I think it's great for everyone, the Wealthy Franchisee. And Stop the Shift show, I'd say the same thing. It's speaking, unlike the first book where franchisees don't know that they need assistance with this stuff. I shouldn't say every, but most franchise business owners, most people who are managing employees know that it's a real pain point. So, and knowing that's the case, that's how I came up with the idea to write the book, Stop the Shift show, to name the problem and then say, here are the solutions. And the problem isn't just them, it's partially them, but it's also you. It's also about how you manage. Maybe there's a way you can manage better to have more influence. And so obviously franchisees and their managers, I think, could benefit that and definitely benefit from this course that I'm creating. But it's the same thing. I think franchisors and operations and field support, they also need to understand what these concepts are so they can do a better job helping franchisees and their managers do these things better. And, Rebecca, you heard me say this on stage with the Franchise Business Review Summit. A lot of franchisors are reluctant to talk about how to manage better because they don't want to be called joint employers.
No.
But franchise attorneys have been very clear. There's a difference between insisting on certain policy and educating people, making suggestions as best practices. These things are very, very different. And I think that franchisors, a lot of them break the promise. They say, we're going to teach you everything you need to know to run a successful business. I think, well, isn't understanding how to really manage employees well and build culture and motivate and engage, isn't that something they need to know? But franchisors, I think they've been afraid to because of joint employer. And honestly, I think most franchisors don't know what it takes to stop the shift show. And I don't blame them for that because it's a miracle that you figured out these awesome recipes and systems and how to scale it and build a franchise brand. To expect that you're an expert managing employees on top of that is a tall order. I want to fill that gap. I want to be that resource through my presentations, my consulting, coaching, my book, my course. I want to help the franchise industry do better for the 8 million hourly workers that rely on franchisees and managers.
So I have two questions too, just like Tracy. Tracy snuck that one in. Um, does the word shift have more than one meaning? Because when I think of shifts, I think of employee shifts, but I also think about changes that are needing to happen or shouldn't be happening, and I can in some way prevent that. So does the word shift show have multiple meanings to you?
It does. I knew it when I came up with it, but honestly, it was meant to be a pun. So
I
I
love
won't lie
it.
that. It was meant to grab attention, but I knew that it was
A
pretty
marketer.
interesting. Yes, but I knew because yes, shift means change. It also refers to, shift workers,
Yeah.
Right.
but it
Love
sounds
her.
like something else, which is how it's usually used when it
Very
describes how
clever.
people are feeling
Yeah, yeah.
about their employees.
So it does have a bunch of different meanings. All right.
Yeah.
I want to get personal. All right. Um, we see your passion and we see the purpose behind what you are doing. You really do want to make a difference in the world of the hourly worker, our franchisees, our franchisors. But let's go back to your earlier life. Where did this start? I mean, was there something that happened or pivotal moments in your life where you said, I got to step into the gap. I got to be part of this solution and stop this shift show. What in your past would have contributed to this passion and to this purpose?
A few years ago, I did a TEDx talk, and it wasn't about this stuff. It was about resilience. And it was really about leaning into adversity, that there's value in adversity. There's value in the bounce, right? Like a successful life is not about this rise. It's about a lot of bouncing and hopefully bouncing higher than you fall. And so one of the things that I discussed in that presentation, and I just discuss it now in some of my franchise presentations, I talk about the highs and lows of my life. I talk about my time in what I call the green zone. All those wonderful things, our business successes and getting engaged to be married and all these cool things that happen. And then in between those moments, there's our time in what I call the red zone, all the bad stuff, right? The breakups, the heartbreak, the loss of a business. And so, like everybody, my life has been a series of peaks and valleys, moments in the green zone, moments in the red zone. So my life path, like everyone else's, is like this. And so what I noticed is that my highest bounces always came after my deepest falls.
Mhm.
So when I think about what are those pivotal moments, it's my time in the red zone. And so when I was 22, I was diagnosed with cancer. And I had graduated UCLA, started film school at NYU, and I had to drop out because I had to spend a year dealing with it. And it was brutal. But at the end of that, a friend of mine said, Hey, I'm putting on a leadership conference. Why don't you come and talk about your experience and how it applies to leadership? And that one speech has led to 30 years of keynote speaking, right? And so
Wow.
I found some meaning in that. And I can't tell you how many times that has happened. I secretly, a few years ago, I'm only now kind of starting to talk about it. I had a second bout with cancer in throat. I didn't tell anybody in the speaking world or franchise world, because who wants to hire or sell a speaker who's battling cancer? Katrina Mitchell from Franchise Speakers is a dear friend. She knew this, and she continued to like just be the dearest friend and really help, and was great with it. It was terrible. It took me to the red zone, but by that point, I had enough ups and downs. I could look back and see the pattern, and I knew, okay, you know what? Something there means I have more to learn and even higher to bounce. And so my most pivotal experiences that have enabled me to enjoy success have been those drops to the red zone. And so I don't enjoy adversity, but I try to change my mindset now to change the question when I'm facing bad stuff, change the question from how can I get out of the red zone to what can I get out of the red zone?
Wow. Drop the mic.
Yes. So I dropped that in the TEDx talk, as you can imagine. But that really is kind of, in that approach, it doesn't make adversity pleasant. It's not that I'm not clamoring to get out of it, but it does cause me to pause, look around and say, maybe there's some change that I can make here. Maybe there's some value here if the pattern continues.
Yeah. Shout out to Katrina, who herself battled some serious health issues and bounced back from that. And it's a great way to look at things, that what's the bounce back gonna be like, knowing it's coming. We may not know exactly what it looks like, but it's going to take you to another level, whether it's another form of contribution, another insight, a developing of our character. But if we can look at it as, yes, it's the red zone, and we don't particularly care for it as much, but there is a bounce to it that inevitably will come. That'll be a testimony to your life.
Yeah. And Rebecca, what I would say to that is, it makes you ponder, what is it we should be praying for
Yes.
or trying to manifest?
Yes.
Usually we try to tap into the universe, or we try to pray. It's usually for something wonderful and pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely do we long for or pray for or desire those experiences in the red zone, when those might be the things that bring the greatest joy, the greatest change, right? The greatest substance to our lives. And so there's a certain trusting of the universe that sometimes our prayers are answered, or our desires are manifested in ways that are very different and less pleasant that we want, but might be the most powerful.
I'm a big believer in prayer, and I know one prayer never to put up, and that's the prayer for patience, because patience will be tested. And honestly, I wouldn't pray for that one. I have incredible patience, but I don't want any more. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I can't stand waiting for that prayer to come true. So,
I can't stand waiting. Come on, or what I'm going to have to go through to develop greater patience. No. I don't want to do that.
Right. So I have to weigh in on this. I pray for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And so I could see how praying for wisdom dovetails into those learning moments, those red zones. What can I get out of this? Give me the wisdom, whatever form it comes in. Let me just receive the wisdom to move forward.
And do it fast. Okay, God, do it fast.
Okay. How can people get more of you, Scott?
Well, the easiest place to contact me is my website, which is scottgreenberg.com, BERG. Although if you type URG, it'll still get there. I pay extra for that. scottgreenberg.com. And for speaking, certainly you can contact Katrina Mitchell at Franchise Speakers as well. So you can contact me directly. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so people can reach out there. But website's a good place to start. scottgreenberg.com. And my books are available on Amazon or wherever books are sold.
And Stop the Shift show comes out later this year, correct? So
no, it's out.
It's out. Okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought it was coming out this winter. All right. So guys, Stop the Shift show is out. Get in there and order it. The Wealthy Franchisee. So many people have benefited from that. So thank you, Scott, for being here. We really, really appreciate you. And to those of you listening in today, make sure to comment, to like, to share Scott Greenberg's interview today, and we'll see you on another episode of the Franchise Woman Podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged.